In this podcast, we're going to talk about US-Turkish relations with Professor Ioannis Grigoriadis, Head of Turkey Program in ELIAMEP, and Nicholas Danforth, non-resident Senior Research Fellow in the Turkey Program. Both of them are experts in Turkey and in Turkey relations with the United States. I want to welcome you both to ELIAMEP's podcast series, and my first question to both of you will be, is this low-key estrangement the new normal in US-Turkish relations? Nicholas?
I assume I wrote a paper saying that a couple weeks before the election, and I should say in the beginning, that was something I wrote before the election. I made the case that indeed low-key estrangement is the new normal in U.S.-Turkish relations. That was written based on developments during the Biden administration, based on the kind of cold but functional relationship that had developed between the United States and Turkey. I think in large part because Biden had tried to develop that kind of relationship. He tried to keep Erdogan at arm's length. He'd recognized that desperately trying to improve relations with Turkey was only going to get us so far. In some cases, it might be counterproductive. So he'd very much kept things cool, and I'd argue it worked. Relations with Turkey were strained. We were estranged. But because Turkey there was no better alternative. Turkey wasn't going to do what the United States wanted. Turkey wasn't going to be the good, loyal ally that many people correctly or incorrectly remember it as, regardless of what the United States did. Being more accommodating of Erdogan wasn't going to make things better. Being more hostile to Erdogan also wasn't going to make him fall in line. So with all that said, I made the case that Biden keeping Turkey at arm's length had been very effective and encouraged the next administration to take the same approach. Now, I should just say, and then I'll wrap this up, in writing that, I had no idea who was going to win the election, but I was confident that if Trump won the election, no one was going to pay any attention to what I or the Brookings Institution had to say about U.S.-Turkish relations. So really, I was saying this was the policy that the Harris administration should keep up were she to win. She, as it turns out, did not win. And as a result, I don't think there's going to be any kind of normal going forward. I think whatever happens, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about this for the rest of the podcast, is going to be wild, is going to be unpredictable. Whatever normal we end up with, it's definitely going to be new. It's not going to be normal.
Well, Ioannis, Trump and Erdogan had good chemistry between them, but they had problems. So how do you think that the new government will do regarding Turkey?
Yes, well, I think that there is a key word that is relevant to many, many aspects of the Trump administration policy, which is uncertainty and unpredictability. We don't really know how things are going to unfold. If we look into the relationship between Trump and Erdogan, or the United States and Turkey during the first Trump administration, we have a period where the relations were not good in the beginning, and then a period where the relationship sharply improved. There is nothing to guarantee that the relationship will continue from where we left it in the end of the Trump administration. President Erdogan made a statement quickly after the election results, calling President-elect Trump as his friend. But I think this also reflects a wish on the side of Turkey to see a new way of thinking on US-Turkey relations. And this, of course, has to do a lot with what Nick mentioned before, that there was this estrangement in the relation between the Biden administration and the Erdogan administration. So the assumption is that the Turkey didn't want to see another Democrat running the White House. Having said that, the appointments of key officials in the Trump administration regarding foreign policy cannot be understood as good news on the side of Ankara, because many of the people like Marco Rubio have been considered to be strongly skeptical in terms of certain aspects of Turkish foreign and domestic policy. And in that respect, it remains to be seen whether we'll have a new normal in the US-Turkey relations as the new government is taking over, or whether some of the open crises, the ongoing crisis around the globe, provide a sort of a, how can I say, stress test for the new relationship. Maybe Trump expects Turkey to deliver in some things, and then Turkey will be in a difficult position to clear its attitude, to kind of make its attitude certain on whether it's going to go the Trump way on Iran or Trump way on the war in Gaza or in the war in Russia, the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So there are a lot of uncertainties, and uncertainties may hide surprises as well for all sides.
Well, Nick, if you could say in the near future, what will prove the biggest source of tension between the United States and Turkey? Will it be Middle East? Will it be Ukraine?
It will definitely be the Middle East. I think there's a bigger discussion to be had, and Ioannis kicked it off already, on what this relationship is going to look like down the road. And I think there are some deeply dividing, overlapping and dividing ideological currents, which we should talk more about. Actually, no, let's talk about them now. I think in a way, the two most immediate diplomatic issues that the United States and Turkey face reflect these two rival diplomatic currents and reflect the ways in which US-Turkish relations are going to converge under Donald Trump, the way their two ideological views are going to come together. And also the other one, Israel in this case, is going to reflect the way their ideological currents diverge and clash. Let me try to take this from the start. The two big issues, major conflicts in Turkey's region, in which the United States is deeply invested: the war in Ukraine to the north, the war in Gaza to the south. I think from Turkey's point of view, Trump's attitude towards the war in Ukraine is going to be much more conciliatory. Trump is basically approaching the war in Ukraine the way that Erdogan would like to, which is to say, he thinks it's time for Russia and Ukraine to make peace, and he doesn't mind if that peace is temporary, works to Russia's advantage, and comes at the expense of Ukrainian sovereignty. And this is what Turkey's been pushing for. Turkey sees NATO and the West's defense of Ukraine as being hostile, as being anti-Russia, as trying to prop up this kind of exaggerated understanding of Western power at the expense of keeping Russia down and preventing the emergence from this new multilateral world order. So in this, there is this mind meld between Erdogan and Trump. There's the sense that the status quo, America's traditional liberal internationalist worldview, represented by NATO, represented by the firm defense of Ukraine against Russia's revisionism. Both Trump and Erdogan are deeply skeptical about this perspective. They see this kind of longstanding impulse in U.S. foreign policy as something that's counterproductive, that's outdated, is based on this naive, unrealistic understanding of liberal values that's now faded and that's now got to give way to a new, less Western-centered world order. So this, to the extent that Trump and Erdogan have the same enemies, the EU, the New York Times, kind of bien-pensant liberalism, Ukraine is something where that shared hostility in the form of Vladimir Zelensky comes together. Now, the flip side of that, Erdogan and Trump agree on what they're opposed to. They agree that this old-fashioned traditional American foreign policy is deeply problematic. They very much disagree on what comes next. And the depth of their disagreement is shown in Gaza. In fairness, a lot of people, traditional liberal internationalists like myself, find Israel's conduct in Gaza and the West Bank also a threat to the liberal international order. In trying to annex the West Bank, I would argue Netanyahu is doing on a small scale what Putin was trying to do in Ukraine: overturn existing boundaries through force, undermine existing countries, commit war crimes, ethnically cleanse populations, all these things that liberal internationalism is against. The difference is, and this is where the Trump and Erdogan folks diverge, they disagree with these existing liberal norms But when it comes to what's going to replace them, the Trump team, and this is clear in all of the appointments he's made, is very much on board with the right-wing, evangelical Christian, and by extension Zionist alternative to this vision. They're very much cheering on the Jewish and Christian actors who are trying to overturn the existing international order, whereas Erdogan, on the other side of this divide, liberal internationalism, the whole idea is to not make international politics based on religion. You have people in the Trump administration and people in Ankara who very much do, and Jerusalem, to be clear, do want to make international relations about religion, about proving the superiority of their religion and the international forces associated with their religion. And Gaza is exactly where those two rival visions come head to head. And so, yeah, both Erdogan and Trump can agree with who they're against, but you're going to have one administration that's Muslim nationalist. You're going to have another administration that's Christian nationalist, that's supporting Zionist, extreme Zionist actors in Israel. And these are going to come into profound conflict. I mean, you have the appointee for Secretary of Defense has straight up crusader tattoos. Like, this is from their point of view, Erdogan, whatever you might think of his views in the liberal international order, is on the wrong side of Jesus. And that, for these people, is going to be a problem.
Well, Ioannis, is Turkey committed, after all, to a more independent foreign policy?
We ran a survey on perceptions of Greek and Turkish public opinion on each other, and we also, in ELIAMEP a couple of years ago, and we also asked the question on whether Turks agreed with the idea that Turkey should have a truly independent foreign policy. And that was one of the questions that received the highest rate of approvals. It was more than 80% that of the Turkish public opinion agreed with the idea of a fully independent Turkish foreign policy. And this finding is linked with a greater discussion about what we call Turkish strategic autonomy. This refers to a rising trend in the Turkish public sphere, whereby we discuss the need of Turkey defining its own short and long-term strategic interests, not in conjunction or in accordance with Western or American or European interests, but by and large on the basis of Turkey's own definition of national interest. And this is a discussion, of course, which goes hand in hand with the greater debate about the decline of the West. We talk about the post-Western world. We talk about the emergence of the BRICS, or countries like China, India, Saudi Arabia in the Middle East, and beyond. So in that respect, there is this discourse, and I'm sure that President Erdogan and his advisors follow that. On the other hand, Turkey remains embedded into the Western political and security institutions, and Turkey remains embedded into the Western European economy. So making this claim is maybe easy in terms of rhetorics, but Turkey is no longer going to depend on what the United States or Germany or the European Union thinks on certain issues and can follow an independent track. But on the other hand, this is going to increase the risks. Turkey still needs Western support. This support may be economic, maybe political, maybe even military. And I would like to raise a point here about what Nick mentioned before about Turkey's and America's position being lined together in reference to a quick end of the war of the Russia's invasion in Ukraine, as President-elect Trump may be sort of planning. I'm not sure that Turkey would be happy with Russia keeping Crimea under its own control. This could be a major shift in the power balance in the Black Sea. Turkey historically, and the Ottoman Empire had big problems ever since the Black Sea used to be an Ottoman lake, and then it turned out to become a contested area between the Russian and the Ottoman Empire. So many wars were fought for Turkey to maintain even partial control of the Black Sea and maintain its control over the Strait. So in that respect, this conflict morphed into the Soviet-Turkish competition and Soviet threats that ended up pushing Turkey into the Western alliance in the 1940s. And the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union offered Turkey a very significant respite. The fact that Crimea became part of Ukraine gave Turkey a stronger hand over Black Sea affairs. If this is going to change one way or the other, Turkey's security dilemmas will be fundamentally transformed. And let's not forget here that the relationship between Russia and Turkey is a relationship based on a very cynical understanding of mutual interest. It's not a friendship or an alliance. Just like we said that US-Turkey relations under Trump and Erdogan may turn sour, the same can happen for Russian-Turkish relations. If Russia perceives the way that the war in Ukraine ends as a sort of approval or success of its tactics and strategies that aim to undermine what we understand as liberal international order. So in that respect, the situation can be quite different. And then Turkey's strategic autonomy may face significant challenges because then Turkey may need the West more than it does today.
And that's what's so fascinating about the way Turkey has perceived the shift in the international order in relation to its own desire for what you say, right? It's sort of consistently stated desire for a more autonomous, more independent foreign policy that, clearly the assumption in Ankara is that the United States is the one holding them back, that American power, American support for the existing world order is what's preventing them from playing the independent role that they want. So you see, even as people's optimism about Trump and Erdogan being able to work together has begun to diminish just in the few weeks since the election, there's been a shift to a now greater optimism about, well, even if Trump and Erdogan can't work together, Trump is going to undermine American power. Trump is going to plunge America into a civil war. This is going to diminish America's influence in the world, and this will give us our opportunity to finally shine. But the flip side of that, as Ioannis said, you look at this in a bigger historical context, Russia's the one right there on Turkey's border, and that if America checking out from the region results in Russia expanding its influence, right? Russia definitely keeping Ukraine, Crimea presumably in any upcoming peace deal. If that's the actor that gets emboldened by America and the EU stepping back, then right, that creates real risks. That's also something that's going to impinge on Turkey's autonomy. And that Turkey's dream, I think, the way people in Turkey have always framed this strategic independence is that they'll be able to use their power and influence to play Russia and America off against each other. But if Russia and America, if America is interested in having better relations with Russia and not interested in getting involved in the region, then that actually, in a way, leaves less room for Turkey to balance the two against each other and puts new constraints on Turkish policy.
So, do you think, Nick, and Ioannis, that Turkey can play, after all, a big role in the peace process in Ukraine? Will Russia or the United States let Turkey play a role?
What do you think, Ioannis?
Well, it is important that they've been speaking to both sides throughout this war. It is also important to refer to the relationship between Putin and Erdogan, because in a sense, if you're going to try to have a peace agreement or a sort of a ceasefire, you should be in talking terms with the person or the regime you're trying to address, right? So there is an opportunity there, but I would argue that Turkey alone cannot do that. Turkey can facilitate an initiative, but the fundamentals of this process will have to be defined by other players. It could be the United States, could be, of course, the European Union, and of course, the willingness of the European Union to step in if the United States is going to withdraw from its support for Ukraine, as it's been debated in the last weeks, is very important. And of course, the ability of the Western actors to convince Ukraine in that respect that they could accept a compromise to their original position, which of course was to restore Ukrainian sovereignty over all the territories that are recognized internationally as part of the Republic of Ukraine. So I can see a role for Turkey there, but this role again depends very much on whether Turkey can be in collaboration and in the same sort of wavelength with the Western security actors.
Nick?
Yeah, I think that facilitate is exactly the right word. I think there's definitely a role for Turkey. It's been Erdogan's put himself at the center of previous negotiations that didn't work, but still made himself central to them. He is on good terms with Trump. He is on good terms with Putin. I think there's every reason to think that, yeah, Turkey can host negotiations. Turkey can support them. Erdogan can be there at the signing of any peace treaty, but it's still, Putin, by all accounts, wants to deal directly with the West. Trump, in many situations, has certainly shown a desire for him to be at the front and center of everything. So, yeah, Turkey will have a role, but it's not, I don't know, it's going to be as the facilitator. It's going to be as the host. When people talk about the Helsinki summit, I don't know, is Finland front and center? Do we think the Helsinki summit is what showed Finland's emergence on the global scene? It's not. I think Turkey will have a more prominent role. That's a little too dismissive. But I just mean at the end of the day, yes, Turkey can play this role. Yes, it will look good for Turkey globally, but it's still, I don't know, as far as international prestige goes, I think there's some sense that, it's not going to be like, Turkey's not going to be like America in the Camp David Accords. Turkey's not going to be like, the powerful country that's bringing its these smaller international actors, America and Russia, together to, bang their heads together and make peace. They're going to be hosting peace talks. And it's, on one hand, I don't want to diminish that. On the other hand, people in Turkey talk about it as if there's this crowning global achievement. And I don't think it's going to seem that way either.
Yannis, do you believe that there is a real threat for Turkey that a Kurdistan state could be possible? We heard a lot of talk about Kurds and what may happen.
Well, there is a discussion now, which is pretty complex because there was an initiative that originated from an unexpected source, the leader of the far-right-wing nationalist party, Devlet Bahçeli, who kind of suggested that Turkey should start a new peace process with the Kurdish population in the country, and even invite the incarcerated former leader of the PKK, Abdullah Öcalan, to the Turkish parliament. This kind of was really a very, very paradoxical statement considering its origins. But at the same time, there is some sort of increase in sanctions against dissident Kurdish political figures, particularly municipal leaders. There have been a lot of removals of Kurdish mayors in eastern and southeastern Turkey, and in Esenyurt, a borough of Istanbul, a Kurdish origin mayor who was elected with a CHP. So it's not just about the pro-Kurdish party, them. It's also about Kurdish candidates and mayors who were elected with a chief opposition party. So at the same time, there is all this discussion about the Kurdish issue in the context of the Gaza war. There is all this talk in Turkey that Israel might want to benefit from the rising significance of the Kurds in Syria or in Iraq in order to put pressure on Turkey. And there have been some statements by Israeli officials that have added credibility to this. If you ask my opinion, I don't find this as a realistic scenario. I don't see how this is going to develop or materialize. I understand that the level of relations between Turkey and Israel is at a very, very low point now. So one can consider that the Kurdish question in Turkey is Turkey's Achilles heel. So trying to manipulate this against Turkish interest might sound as a sort of interesting or sort of appealing thing to do, but I don't find this realistic at all. Actually, this discussion can also help fuel anti-Kurdish sentiment within Turkey, because it kind of really sort of tries to put Kurds in the sort of position of the fifth column, the kind of the part of the population which is really to collaborate with enemies of Turkey and those who are trying to divide Turkish state and sort of undermine Turkish sovereignty. So in that respect, I don't see this going anywhere. And I do understand, though, its sensitivity and the fact that it has captured a significant part of Turkish domestic political debate, even with relevance to the Gaza war. So it's not just about whether this latest initiative to revitalize the Kurdish peace process may have any chances or not. It's also about Turkey's foreign policy in the Middle East.
Nick?
And I just briefly add, I mean, this touches on what we were talking about before as well, at least in the international dimension. That Turkey's been very much focused on United States support for Kurdish forces in northeastern Syria and the risk that that poses in terms of actually creating a PKK-aligned statelet in the region. So in that sense, Trump has been very consistent in saying he wants to withdraw U.S. forces from Syria. That's something Turkey's very eager for. But then it raises the question, what happens when U.S. forces leave? Kurdish groups there have also maintained historically strong relations to Moscow. They've made sure to keep on appropriate terms with the Assad regime. And, there are all these fears about the possibility of Israel throwing its support behind them, which Israeli commentators are certainly hinting at. So from Turkey's point of view, I mean, yeah, it would be great if the United States withdrew. That would give Turkey more freedom of action. But if all of a sudden you found Russia, Assad, and Israel working together to strengthen these forces in opposition to Turkey, that poses some new risks.
Regarding now Africa, could there be a cooperation between the United States and Turkey? We know that Turkey has gained influence in Africa through different ways, more through soft diplomacy. Can you see Washington and Ankara cooperating in Africa? Ioannis?
Well, that's a new and interesting chapter in Turkish foreign policy. Turkey has been investing heavily financially and diplomatically in several key African states and got in one way or the other involved into disputes and conflicts across the continent. But I think this very much depends on how willing the United States is willing to maintain a presence. If Trump really follows an isolationist foreign policy, so I would expect him to try to get rid of disputes and try to leave regions like the Middle East. In that case, it would be very difficult to imagine him coming to Mali or to Niger or to sort of Ethiopia, other real or emerging conflict zone in Africa. What could change, of course, the discussion is China's involvement. If America's foreign policy acquires this strong anti-China element, and considering that China is also investing heavily in Africa over the last few years and tries to acquire access to raw materials, to sort of natural resources, and sort of develop its own supply chains from the African continent, then America's involvement in the region might be more relevant. And in that respect, there could be an opportunity for cooperation with Turkey, given the already existing and growing Turkish links in the continent. But overall, I think it's the answer to the question depends on American isolationism. Is it going to be real or not?
Nick?
Yeah, it strikes me there are people in Ankara and Washington who are committed to maintaining the perception or the belief that there's some positive agenda the United States and Turkey can work towards. And as it's been harder and harder to maintain that illusion anywhere in Turkey's geography, can't say it's going to happen or at least you couldn't up until Trump, who knows now. In the past, you couldn't say it was going to happen in Ukraine. It couldn't say it was happening in the Eastern Mediterranean. You couldn't say it was happening in the Middle East. So people really hit on Africa. These people who wanted to say there was still something good that could happen. There's still a way the U.S. and Turkey work together. They were like, well, what about Africa? Turkey's expanding its influence in the region, and that can advance the U.S. interests in crowding out China. And it's sort of glass half full, glass half empty. Like no one thinks that Turkey's going to work with the United States. Turkey's going to work, as it has made very, very clear, to pursue its own interests as it sees fit in accordance with this independent foreign policy that it's been touting. Now, to the extent that expanding Turkish influence simply means that countries have another option for buying weapons, another option for seeking construction crews or airport architects besides China, yeah, that's going to diversify the political competition. That's going to mean that it's going to somewhat diminish China's influence. But it's also going to come at the expense of Western influence. It's not that Turkey's going to be acting in lockstep with the West. It's not that Turkey's going to be calibrating its investments or its military sales in a way that benefits Western-backed actors or benefits, traditional, at least, Western security concerns about democracy and stability. From this point of view, even from the sort of traditional U.S. foreign policy point of view, it was going to be a mixed bag. I mean, yeah, there'd be another country that wasn't China, but there'd also be another country that wasn't the West. And now, as Ioannis said, when you don't have any clear idea of what U.S. foreign policy is going to be, when you have U.S. foreign policy largely absent and no kind of clear vision of what the United States wants there, other than probably to keep China out, probably to get some kind of mining and mineral concessions, it's going to be even harder to see this as anything other than a talking point. Any kind of Turkey will do what it wants. United States will watch that happen and say sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. But it's not, from both Turkey and the United States' point of view, under the current Turkish and American governments, it's hard to really see any kind of substantial cooperation taking place there.
Well, I thank you both for this discussion. You help us see the big picture about Turkey and the United States under the new government that will take place after the 20th of January. Nick, Ioannis, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Thank you.